This driveway paint job should have been an absolute disaster.
2.5 years ago, I started building my dream Land Cruiser. I knew if I could pull off an epic paint job, I would keep it forever. What I didn't know was that it was going to become the most physically and mentally draining project I'd ever taken on. But it turned out so good, I knew I had to share it with you. When I bought this Land Cruiser, it looked like this. Now it looks like this. Today I'm going to show you exactly how I sprayed this thing in my parents' driveway. I'm going to be showing you exactly how I transformed this Land Cruiser with fresh paint and all the bodywork. Obviously this was a huge project and it took a ton of time, but ultimately I was able to do it all myself and it was relatively inexpensive. The whole paint job with all the bodywork cost about $3,000. I do have another video going through that in a little more detail, but today I'm going to show you how I did it. The most difficult part of this whole project was the body itself. Getting this thing straight was a huge undertaking and it took a ton of time and it wasn't a lot of fun. So if you're looking at doing this and including the Bondo work, just know it's going to take about 10 times longer than you thought and you're going to hate it, but that's just part of it. So getting into the paint itself, once everything was straight and everything looked good, it was time to shoot it with some primer. We decided to go with a high build primer. We sourced everything from a professional paint shop. Me and my dad both, with a little bit of research, we were able to find some of the best products to use for beginners like ourselves. And ultimately, we ended up going with the high build primer to kind of help reduce some of those imperfections in the Bondo itself, because obviously it wasn't perfect because we did it. And we knew that that high build primer could add some value in getting it straight and filling some of those gaps that needed to be filled. When it came to the primer itself, we actually just shot that under a canopy from Costco because we knew there was going to be a lot of time spent sanding it down and we weren't too worried about getting that piece of the puzzle perfect. So we were able to just kind of spray everything down and just shoot it inside of there. We took the doors off, we did all those things to get the jams and all that. But once we got it all covered and all the primer was on it, it was time to sand it down. And one of the things that we ran into when we got the primer all on it was we realized it almost went on like Velcro. It was like very rough, wasn't smooth at all. So there was a lot of sanding ahead. And once we got everything sanded down, many hours of wet sanding it, getting it as smooth as we could, knocked down any high spots, got it perfectly flat. It exposed a little metal here and there, so we had to go over it again with some self-etch and then primed it again. And then after all that work was done, it was time to go ahead and start getting it ready for paint. Once the sanding was done and it was time for paint, we went ahead, got everything prepped. We wiped it down, anti-greasers, all those things to get it ready to kind of put that base coat on. And this is where things got really scary because all those hours and time and sweat and tears, honestly, that went into getting it primed and all the body work and getting it straight, it was now time to be like, okay, this is the part where we can't be almost perfect, we have to be perfect. And that made me really nervous. So my dad ended up, being wise and decided that the Costco canopy wasn't the best option for laying paint, which, that makes sense. So we ended up purchasing an inflatable paint booth, which kind of seems crazy, but for the cost and how good they are, it ended up being a great buy, and it ended up making this paint job 10 times better than it could have ever been. It kept things out of the air, and it made it a little more doable. So when it came to the first base coat, we got everything ready, and we started to spray it on. The first base coat went on pretty good. We ended up doing all the door jams first, so we had all the doors hung in there and we shot those first. And honestly, that went incredibly well. Like, the paint turned out awesome. I started to get pretty excited about it because, it started to look like something. All that work started to pay off and the door jams looked absolutely amazing. And then it was time to take those out and push the cruiser in and really start dialing in the cruiser itself. So that first base coat went on the cruiser well. Everything looked good and it started to look nice. And then we got another coat on there, and then when it came to putting the clear coat on is when things got a little bit less fun, because I was doing most of the spraying, never done any of this in my life. So it was a little bit scary and a little bit messy. There were, all things considered, there's very few runs in the thing, But you know, when I first started, I was going a little light, then I was going a little heavy, and there were some runs here and there. My dad was following me around with an LED light to kind of help me. But when you're in there and you've got your masks on and all this cheap stuff, because I know I was on a budget and I didn't have all the professional stuff that you probably should have when you're dealing with toxic things. But you know, we got it on, we got the clear coat on, and you know, it looked pretty good. I knew that there was going to be a little orange peel, there was going to be some cut and buffing, but that was nothing compared to all the work that went into it. And we got it in there and it started to look great, and then we ran into a huge problem. The paint started to crack. It was an absolute disaster. We got everything, it looked so good, but we ran into that issue. And I think the main thing was the sun beating down on it. It was so hot that day, it was like 95 degrees. We got out there early, everything took longer than we thought, so we really didn't start getting stuff onto it, getting all the, you know, the base coat on and the clear coat on until midday, you know, afternoon, and it was already so hot by then, and that sun beating down on it. I'm no professional, I still don't really know to this day what happened. I'll flash some pictures up so you can see it, but the paint just, you know, it just started to fracture, and there's still some spots on it where you can see it. It's just kind of like a little token of all that work, and you know, kind of a little bit of disappointment, but it's kind of a funny story. But the hood was the worst. It was covered in them and I knew we were gonna have to redo it, and that was just heartbreaking because all that work, and it looked so good for it to just be bad and have to restart. So we ended up just keeping, I figured we might as well just spray the whole thing and just see how it turns out. So most of the cruiser was good. The hood, like I said, was really bad. We knew we were gonna have to redo it. And then there were some spots on the back and a few other things. So we pulled it out, we inspected it once it all cured. We knew the hood was bad, so we ended up stripping the hood down again, which was a ton of work because that paint, you know, it never quite cured. Like I said, I don't really know what happened. Someone that's watching might know what happened, but it just fractured and it was almost gooey. You could like scrape it off with your fingernail after a day. So it never cured, and it never set up, and it never looked quite right. So we redid the hood, and then we had to redo like one of the whole sides because it also had that issue, and there were those fracture spots on it. So we had to sand it down, and then we ended up having to go in with like a dark gray 3M pad where we scuffed out all of the clear coat so that we could shoot it all in one pass again and make sure that we could blend it all correctly, because it was a new batch of paint and it was a ton of work. It was honestly like one of the most heartbreaking things in my life, honestly, because so many hours went into it, and that was a huge problem. So if you're looking to do this yourself, make sure you go talk to a professional, get a little bit more information on what might go wrong, especially with conditions like that. I honestly, like I said, I think it was the temperature, I think it was the weather, but who knows? We could have mixed something wrong. It could have been something that we prepped the surface with. It could have been so many different things, because it really seemed like a chemical reaction of some sort, because even when we stripped the whole hood and down to primer, we shot it again and it did the same thing. So whatever was in that primer too, it was bad news. So we ended up having to strip it down to bare metal and redo all the bodywork. Like I said, total heartbreak. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the camera and we're gonna take a closer look at this thing. It is in all its glory. The hood actually is all PPF'd because, like I said, so many hours went into it. I figured I may as well protect it. So the hood and the doors, all four doors, do have PPF on them. But you can see, you know, looking closely, this is the light blue metallic OEM paint code. It turned out absolutely amazing. Like I said, we used professional stuff from a local paint shop. I can, you know, if you have any questions as far as brands go, I can find out all that information for you. And if you have any other questions as you're watching the video, or as you're thinking about doing a project like this, just drop a comment, because I'm more than happy to talk through it, because I would have loved to have a resource while me and my dad were taking on this project. And I have a lot of knowledge just because I screwed up so many steps of the process. And I think you can avoid making a lot of those same mistakes that I did. Moral of the story, you can do it. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out some of my other stuff. I do a full video showing you how I LS swapped this thing, as well as how I cut and stitch welded the back half onto this one. That made the paint job look easy, and probably what gave me the confidence, maybe the confidence I probably shouldn't have, to do the paint itself. But if you have any questions or any concerns, feel free to drop a comment. And if you have any idea what happened to the cracking on the hood and some of the other spots, let me know, because like I said, I still have no idea. Thanks for watching.